Hi guys, it's Miss B. I'm back today. I know it's been a few days since I've read to you, but I wanted to go ahead and read chapter 14 for you today. And so I hope that everybody's doing well. Truth is, I've been working a lot around my house. I've been trying to organize closets and cleaning out things. So I've been really busy doing that. So I miss you guys, and I hope you're doing well. But here's chapter 14. See, on the outside, Nick was still Nick. But inside, it was different. Oh, sure, he still had a lot of great ideas, but now they scared him a little. For instance, Nick learned in social studies class that people who buy stuff are called consumers. And if consumers stop buying, stores and shops and restaurants will go out of business. Then boom, a new idea hit him. All the kids love lunchtime. But the awful part about lunch was the eating part, the school food. And the food was never a surprise. You had to smell it all morning and then go eat it. Food was always bad. Well, thought Nick, the school cafeteria is sort of a restaurant, isn't it? And the students are consumers, right? We don't really have to buy our lunches there, do we? Nick could see it all. He would get all the kids to bring their lunches from home every day until the ladies who made the lunches cooked better food. He was sure that those women didn't cook food like that for their own families. The kids were the consumers with the $1.35 in their pockets. And until the food was better, that's where their money would stay. Great idea. Nick was sure it would work, and he got all excited about it. But then Nick remembered what happened with Frindle, and it stopped him cold. He was sure if all the kids stopped buying lunch, sooner or later, someone would figure out that it was all Nick Allen's idea. He would get in trouble, and people would write about it in the newspaper, and the principal would call his parents. Anything could happen. But for the first time in his life, Nick kept a good idea to himself. He never even told John or Chris. And that changed Nick. His mom was the first to notice. "Are things okay at school, honey?" she asked one day in early March. He had seemed kind of down, a little sad, and it worried her. "Sure," said Nick. "Everything's fine. Everything's okay with your friends, right? They haven't been hanging around here very much lately." Mom, honest, everything's fine. It's winter. Everyone's really busy with hockey and basketball. That's it. Okay? And Nick went to his room and shut the door. Mrs. Granger noticed the change too. The clever little rascal who had looked her in the eye and said, "But I really didn't have a Frindle with me." That boy wasn't in her class anymore. There now was a quieter, more careful Nicholas Allen, who came into class every day. He did all his work perfectly, didn't speak unless he was called on, and he didn't laugh and joke with his friends like he used to. School would be over in a few months, and it seemed like there was nothing she could do to help him. Towards the end of the year, Nick remembered the letter that Mrs. Granger had asked him to sign on the back when the Frindle business was getting started. The chess game was over, so he was expecting to get that letter from Mrs. Granger any day now. But all spring it didn't come, and he thought that she must have forgotten all about that letter. Nick was afraid to bring it up to her, and he was dying out of curiosity. So on the last day of school, Nick knocked on Mrs. Granger's classroom door. She was straightening up the textbooks on the bookcases below the windows. Without turning around, she sang out, "Come in!" Nick said, "Hi, Mrs. Granger." Mrs. Granger stood up and turned to face him. "Oh, it's you, Nicholas? I'm so glad you stopped by. I've been meaning to talk to you, and this will save me having to send you a letter this summer." Nick gulped. "That's what I came for, the letter," he said. Mrs. Granger looked puzzled for half a second, and then she said, Oh, the letter. And then she paused. You will recall, Nicholas, that I said I would send you that letter when all this was over. And, it's not over. It's not? Nick tilted his head to one side and said, When will it be over then? Mrs. Granger smiled and said, Oh, believe me, Nicholas, you'll know when it's all over. I wanted to talk to you about something else. And she walked across the room and stood about 2 feet from him. Nick had grown during the school year, and their eyes were almost on the same level. Nick noticed that the eyes were softer, but just as powerful. I've noticed that you've been very quiet for the past few months. Nicholas, you didn't do anything wrong this year. I know a lot of things happened, and a lot of things were sad, and you must have had some difficult days here and there. But your idea was a good idea, and I have been very proud of the way you behaved. Well, most of the time, she said. Nick was a little embarrassed, but Mrs. Granger kept on talking. And, Nicholas, you have great things to do in this life. I'm absolutely sure that you do, and you must not let a few hard days trick you into clamming up. Then Mrs. Granger reached out and shook his hand and looked him square in the face. Her eyes were turned up brighter than Nick had ever seen them before, and she said, Nicholas Allen, I've enjoyed having you as a student. So now go out there and have a wonderful summer. And I expect to hear remarkable things about you, young man. Mrs. Granger watched Nick start to leave, but before he got to the door, he turned around and he said, Thanks, Mrs. Granger. You have a good summer too, he said, and then he grinned. He said, and don't forget to buy some new Frindles next year. Thanks to his little talk with Mrs. Granger with a healthy dose of summer vacation, Nick made a full recovery. He was proud that he had made up a new word, and he enjoyed thinking about all the commotion that had stirred up with one little word that he had made his 5th grade year, and it made his 5th grade year a year to remember. Before he started 6th grade, Nick was Nick again, and all through junior high and high school and college, he proved it. For example, 2 years later, all the school cafeterias in town were serving delicious food at least 4 days a week, all because of Nick, the consumer. And the state superintendent of schools had made a special trip to Westfield to learn why this little town had the most successful school lunch program in the state. And in high school, the stories about Nick's other adventures would go on and on and on, but that would delay the end of the story, the one that started when Nick was in 5th grade. Because the end of the story came later, 10 years later. And what was happening to Nick's word during those 10 years? Nothing fancy, nothing exciting. Words don't work that way. Words either get used or they don't get used. And Frindle was being used more and more. It was becoming a real word. And that is the end of chapter 14. Hope you enjoyed it. I will post chapter 15 tomorrow, and I believe chapter 15 is the very last chapter of Frindle. I hope you are, maybe I'll check and see. It's a pretty long chapter, but I'm pretty sure that this book has 15 chapters. And that'll be the end of Frindle. But I hope you're doing well. I think about you every day and miss you guys, and just hope you're doing well. Bye-bye.